The alarm clock blinked at 6:47 a.m., 2 minutes late. Nathan's gut twisted. Olivia always knocked at 6:45. Something was wrong. He pressed his ear against the wall separating their bedrooms, straining to hear the familiar sounds of his sister getting ready for school. The morning silence felt thick and unnatural, broken only by the gentle hum of the heating system. Usually, Olivia's cheerful humming would filter through the thin walls, accompanied by the soft thuds of dresser drawers, opening and closing. Nathan's fingers trembled as he pulled on his school uniform. The crisp September air sneaking through his window made him shiver. But it wasn't just the cold that sent chills down his spine. Ever since Mom had started working the night shift at the hospital 3 months ago, he and Olivia had developed a precise morning routine. She would wake up first, get dressed, and then knock on his wall at exactly 6:45. It was their secret code, their way of staying connected even when Mom couldn't be there. He grabbed his backpack and crept into the hallway, his sock-covered feet silent against the hardwood floor. Olivia's door was slightly ajar, another deviation from their routine. She always kept it closed until she was ready for school. "Liv," he whispered, pushing the door open wider. "We're going to be late for—" The words died in his throat. Olivia's bed was perfectly made, the purple comforter pulled tight and smooth across the mattress. Her matching purple backpack sat on her desk chair, but something about it looked wrong. Nathan approached slowly, his heart pounding against his ribs. When he lifted the bag, it was unnaturally light. Opening it revealed nothing but a single sheet of notebook paper, folded into quarters. His hands shook as he unfolded the paper. The message was written in Olivia's neat handwriting, but the letters were shaky as if she'd been rushing. "Don't tell Mom. Don't call the police. Check the basement. But Nathan, be careful. They're watching." The paper slipped from his trembling fingers and floated to the floor. Nathan's gaze darted to Olivia's desk, where she always kept her prized possession, the leather-bound journal Mom had given her for her 12th birthday last month. The journal was gone. His mind raced through possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Olivia would never leave without telling him. She would never skip school. And she definitely wouldn't go anywhere without her phone, which still sat on her nightstand, its screen dark and silent. The basement. She wanted him to check the basement. But the basement had been off-limits ever since they moved into the house 2 years ago. Mom had been crystal clear about that rule. Neither of them was ever to go down there. She'd even installed a heavy-duty lock on the door, keeping the key on her personal key ring. Nathan glanced at his watch. 6:52 a.m. The school bus would arrive. In 23 minutes, he should be eating breakfast, packing his lunch, and following their normal routine. Instead, he found himself moving toward the kitchen, toward the basement door, drawn by an invisible force he couldn't resist. The lock was still in place, its sturdy metal gleaming in the early morning light. But something caught his eye, a thin strip of paper, barely visible, protruding from beneath the door. He knelt down and carefully pulled it free. Another note in Olivia's handwriting, even shakier than the first. "The key is in my jewelry box, under the false bottom. Hurry." Nathan's breath caught in his throat. How had Olivia known about a hidden key? And more importantly, what had she discovered in the basement that was so urgent, so dangerous, that she had to leave these cryptic messages? As he stood there, frozen in indecision, a sound reached his ears that made his blood run cold. From somewhere beneath his feet, muffled but unmistakable, came 3 distinct taps, their secret knock. Olivia was down there. And she wasn't alone. Nathan's fingers trembled as he raced up the stairs to Olivia's room, his footsteps echoing through the empty house. The sound of those 3 taps from the basement still rang in his ears, driving him forward. He had to find that key. Olivia's jewelry box sat on her dresser, a delicate wooden thing with painted roses that Mom had given her for Christmas. As he lifted it, memories from the past few weeks began clicking into place like puzzle pieces, forming a picture he should have seen sooner. 3 weeks ago, Olivia had stopped eating dinner with them. "I'm not hungry," she'd say, pushing her plate away with barely a bite taken. Her face had grown pale, dark circles forming under her eyes like bruises. Mom had attributed it to exam stress, but Nathan remembered the way Olivia's hands would shake when she checked her phone, how she'd angle the screen away if anyone walked past. He pressed the hidden catch on the jewelry box, something he'd discovered years ago while snooping for Christmas presents. The false bottom popped up, revealing a small brass key that looked far older than their house. As he held it, another memory surfaced. Last Thursday, he'd woken to the sound of crying coming from the bathroom. Olivia's sobs had been muffled, desperate, as if she was trying to stay quiet. When she emerged, her eyes red and puffy, he'd pretended to be asleep. The next morning, she'd plastered on a smile and told Mom everything was fine. "Just stressed. About the science fair," she'd said. Mom had nodded sympathetically, but Nathan had seen the way Olivia's fingers drummed nervously against her thigh, a tell she had when she was lying. The changes had been subtle at first. Olivia stopped humming. While doing her homework, her phone would buzz at odd hours, and she'd jump as if shocked. Once, Nathan had glimpsed a message preview on her screen. "Time is running out. Make your choice." When he'd asked about it, she'd laughed it off. "Just drama with my friends," she'd said, but her voice had cracked on the word friends. 2 days ago, he'd overheard her arguing with someone on the phone in her room. "You can't make me," she'd whispered fiercely. "I won't do it." When he'd knocked on her door, she'd fallen silent so quickly, it was as if she'd vanished. Nathan had tried telling their neighbor, Mrs. Martinez, about his concerns. She'd patted his head and said, "Oh, honey, that's just how girls are at that age. Your sister's becoming a teenager. Mood swings are normal." But normal didn't explain the way Olivia had started checking the locks 3 times before bed, or how she'd begun wearing their dad's old watch, the one that had stopped working years ago on the day of the accident. As he descended the stairs, with the key clutched in his hand, Nathan spotted something he'd missed before. A crumpled paper ball had rolled into the corner near the basement door. His heart pounding, he smoothed it out. The handwriting wasn't Olivia's. The letters were sharp and angular, written with such force that they'd torn through the paper in places. "You don't belong here. Stop digging, or everyone will know what you found." The basement door loomed before him, its dark wood suddenly seeming more like a warning than a barrier. The key felt ice-cold in his palm. 3 more taps echoed from below, more urgent this time. Something clicked in Nathan's memory. The night last week when he'd found Olivia in the kitchen at 3 a.m., frantically erasing something in her journal. She'd slammed it shut when she saw him, but not before he'd glimpsed a hastily drawn diagram that looked like the basement. The same journal that was now missing. A sound from above made him freeze. Footsteps on the front porch. Through the window, he saw Mrs. Martinez approaching the front door, her hand raised to knock. She wasn't supposed to check on them until after school, unless the basement door rattled ever so slightly. Another 3 taps, weaker this time. Nathan looked at the front door, then at the basement key in his hand. He had to make a choice. Now, he inserted the key into the lock, just as Mrs. Martinez's knocking echoed through the house. The tumblers, turned with a sound like bones breaking. What he saw when he opened that door would change everything. But not in the way he expected, because there, on the first step, was Olivia's journal, and on its open pages, in his sister's handwriting, were 5 words that made his blood run cold. "Mom isn't who she claims." Nathan grabbed Olivia's journal and ducked into the basement, pulling the door shut behind him, just as Mrs. Martinez's key scraped into the front door lock. His trembling fingers found his phone's flashlight, illuminating a narrow staircase that descended into darkness. The basement air felt thick and cold, carrying a metallic scent he couldn't place. His footsteps echoed on the wooden stairs as he made his way down, one hand trailing along the rough concrete wall. The beam of his flashlight caught something that made him pause. Scratch marks in the wall as if someone had been counting days. At the bottom of the stairs, he swept his light across the basement. Old boxes lined the walls, labeled in his mother's precise handwriting. Medical records, family photos. Olivia, birth to age 5. But what caught his attention was the fresh cardboard box in the center of the room, its lid askew. Next to it lay Olivia's purple pen, the one she used only for her most important writing. His hands shaking, Nathan opened Olivia's journal. A folded paper fell out, a printout of text messages. His stomach churned as he read them. "Your mother isn't who you think she is. Keep quiet, and we won't tell Nathan what really happened to your father. Time to pay for your father's mistakes, Olivia. The truth would destroy your brother. We're watching. One word to anyone, and everything falls apart." The journal's pages were filled with Olivia's increasingly desperate entries. September 15th. They messaged again. They know things about Dad's accident that weren't in the news. Things Mom never told us. I have to protect. Nathan. September 18th. Mom's been acting strange. I caught her replacing photos in our family albums. The new ones look almost identical, but Dad's face is slightly different. Why would she do that? September 20th. Found more medical records in the basement. They don't make sense. Mom's name is different on the older ones. When I asked her about it, she said I was imagining things, but her hands were shaking. September 23rd. Reasons why I feel like disappearing. The lies are suffocating me. Nathan deserves to know the truth, but I can't be the one to tell him Mom isn't who she says she is. I found proof. They know what really happened to Dad. Everything in this house feels wrong. The basement holds answers, but I'm scared of what I'll find if I stay. They'll hurt Nathan. To September 24th, yesterday. I found it. The real death certificate. Dad didn't die in a car accident. And the woman upstairs isn't our mother. Nathan's blood turned to ice as he turned the page. Taped, there was a newspaper clipping from 12 years ago. Local woman and 2 children missing, presumed dead. The photo showed a family, his family, but the woman's face was different. Slightly, but unmistakably different from the mother he knew. A soft scraping sound made him whirl around. There, in the beam of his flashlight, stood Olivia. Her face was tear-streaked, her clothes dirty. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I had to know the truth. But now they're coming. They've always been coming. Footsteps creaked on the floorboards above, too heavy to be Mrs. Martinez. Nathan's phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from an unknown number. Like sister. Like brother. Should have kept your nose out of it. The basement door opened. Light spilled down the stairs, and there stood their mother. or the woman they'd thought was their mother. Her face twisted into an expression Nathan had never seen before. "Oh, children," she said, her voice different now, harder. "You've made this so much more difficult than it needed to be." Behind her, two men in dark suits appeared on the stairs. One of them held up a badge that made Olivia gasp. "Federal Witness Protection," he said. "But not for who you think." Nathan's hand found Olivia's in the darkness. His other hand clutched her journal, the proof of everything. He had seconds to decide: run, hide, fight, or surrender to whatever truth was about to shatter their world. The woman who wasn't their mother took one step down the stairs. "It's time," she said, "for you to learn what really happened the night your father disappeared, and why we've been protecting you all these years." Nathan's thumb hovered over the emergency call button on his phone. One press, and everything would change. But as he looked at Olivia's face, he saw something in her eyes that made him hesitate. Not fear, but recognition. She knew something he didn't, and that's when the lights went out. The darkness lasted only seconds before emergency lights flickered on, casting the basement in an eerie red glow. In that bloody light, Nathan saw tears streaming down Olivia's face. Not tears of fear, but of relief. "I wanted to tell you," she whispered. "God, Nathan, I wanted to tell you everything." The woman on the stairs, the stranger wearing their mother's face, held up her hands. "Nobody move," she ordered, but her voice cracked. For the first time, Nathan heard uncertainty in her tone. The federal agent with the badge stepped forward. "Mrs. Collins," he said, using a name Nathan had never heard. "It's over. The trail's gone cold. We can't keep them in the dark any longer." Nathan's phone burst to life in his hand, their real mother's face filling the screen. Not a photo, but a live video call. Her face was older than in the newspaper clipping, lined with years of worry, but unmistakably her. "My babies," she breathed, her voice breaking. "You're alive. You're both alive." Olivia's knees buckled. Nathan caught her before she hit the concrete floor, his sister's body shaking with sobs. "I found her," Olivia gasped. "Last month, I found her online. The articles about Dad's death didn't make sense, so I kept digging. Then they started threatening me, saying they'd hurt you if I didn't stop." The woman on the stairs, Agent Sarah Mitchell, they would later learn, sank down, her disguise crumbling. "Your father was going to testify," she said quietly, "about things he saw at the hospital where he worked. Things that would have brought down very powerful people. When they tried to kill him, to kill all of you, we had no choice. We had to make the world believe you were dead. But Dad," Nathan's voice broke on the word, "is alive," the second agent said. "In protective custody, like your mother. Like you were supposed to be, until someone recognized Olivia at school and started asking questions." Suddenly, sirens wailed outside. Red and blue lights strobed through the basement windows. Agent Mitchell's face hardened. "Who called them?" "I did," came Mrs. Martinez's voice from upstairs. "When I saw men in suits entering a house with 2 children home alone, you bet I called the police." Everything happened at once. The front door burst open upstairs. Officers shouted commands. Agent Mitchell reached for something in her jacket, but the other agent grabbed her arm. "Don't," he warned. "It's time to let go." Olivia clutched Nathan's arm. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry. When I found Mom online, I couldn't stop looking. Then they started leaving notes in my locker at school, threatening messages on my phone. They said they'd hurt you if I told anyone. I was so scared, Nathan." "So scared? You had no right to go through my things," she suddenly screamed, pushing away from him. "My journal was private. I was handling it." But even as she yelled, her hands gripped his jacket tighter, betraying her words. She wasn't angry. She was terrified. Terrified and relieved and broken all at once. The police swarmed down the basement stairs, guns drawn. Agent Mitchell and her partner surrendered without resistance. As officers led them away, Mitchell paused beside Nathan and Olivia. "We were trying to protect you," she said softly. "Everything I did, becoming your mother, watching over you, it was to keep you safe." "Safe?" Olivia's voice cracked like glass. "Do you know what it's like? Living with someone wearing my mother's face, but knowing something was wrong? Feeling crazy because no one else seemed to notice? Do you know what that does to a person?" Nathan held his sister as she broke down again, her words dissolving into heartbreaking sobs. Above them, he could hear the chaos of multiple agencies arriving: FBI, witness protection, victim services. Their quiet life was exploding in real time. His phone buzzed again. Their real mother's voice came through, stronger now. "We're on our way. Your father and we're coming home. Just hold on, my loves. Just hold on." Nathan looked at the journal in his hands, at the sister crying in his arms, at the life they'd thought they knew crumbling around them. He'd saved Olivia from her private hell, but at what cost? Their safety was compromised, their identities exposed. The careful facade that had protected them for 12 years had shattered. Yet as he held his sister, as he heard his real mother's voice promising to come home, he felt something he hadn't expected: hope. They'd lived so long in a beautiful lie that the ugly truth felt like freedom. Mrs. Martinez appeared at the bottom of the stairs, tears in her eyes. "The paramedics want to check you both," she said gently. "And there are people here. People who can explain everything." Olivia straightened up, wiping her eyes. "I don't need explanations," she said, her voice stronger. "I need my real mom. I need my dad. I need time," Nathan finished for her. "We need time." As they climbed the stairs together, emerging into the chaos of flashing lights and urgent voices, Nathan felt Olivia squeeze his hand. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not giving up, for seeing what I couldn't tell you." The morning sun was rising over their neighborhood, painting the sky in shades of hope. Nothing would ever be the same. But maybe, Nathan thought as he held his sister's hand, maybe that was exactly what they needed. 3 months later, Nathan sat on the front porch of their new house, watching the December sunrise paint the sky in watercolor hues. The morning air was crisp, his breath forming small clouds that drifted away like the last wisps of their old life. Inside, he could hear Olivia laughing, a sound that had once seemed lost forever. She was in the kitchen with their parents, their real parents, making pancakes for their weekly family breakfast. It had become their new tradition, replacing the fearful silence of their old mornings with warmth and noise and life. The investigation had revealed everything. The hospital where their father worked had been covering up fatal medical mistakes, protecting wealthy donors at the expense of patients' lives. When he'd gathered enough evidence to expose them, they'd tried to silence him permanently. The witness protection program had stepped in, but something had gone wrong. The family had been separated, told the others were dead to maintain the deception's integrity. Agent Mitchell was facing charges, not for protecting them, but for going rogue, making unauthorized decisions that had ultimately exposed them all. Nathan still couldn't hate her, though. In her own twisted way, she'd tried to give them a mother's love. The kids who'd been threatening Olivia, paid by people connected to the hospital scandal, had been caught. They were facing juvenile detention, but Olivia hadn't wanted to attend their hearings. "They're not worth any more of my time," she'd said, her voice stronger than he'd heard it in months. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Martinez. "Check your front steps." There, wrapped in colorful paper, sat a package. Inside was a new journal for Olivia, its leather cover embossed with a phoenix. The note read, "Some stories need to be told. Some need to be burned. You'll know the difference now." Nathan heard the front door open behind him. Olivia stepped out, wrapped in their father's old cardigan, the real one, not the replica Agent Mitchell had used to maintain their false life. "Mom's teaching Dad how to make chocolate chip smiley faces in the pancakes," she said, sitting beside him. "He's terrible at it. They look more like grimaces." She laughed, then grew serious. "I never thanked you properly, you know." "For what?" "For seeing me. Really seeing me. When I was trying so hard to be invisible." She pulled something from the cardigan's pocket. Her old journal. "I want you to burn this with me. Tonight. I don't need it anymore." Nathan looked at his sister. Really looked. At her. The dark circles under her eyes had faded. Her shoulders no longer curved inward like she was trying to disappear. She was healing, not just surviving. "Did you ever imagine," she asked, "that finding the truth would set us free? I spent so long afraid of what would happen if our fake life fell apart. But now we get to build a real one," Nathan finished. Their mother called them in for breakfast. Through the window, Nathan could see their father attempting to flip a pancake. It landed half on the griddle, half on his arm, and everyone burst out laughing. Real laughter, not the careful, measured kind they'd lived with for 12 years. Olivia stood, offering her hand to help him up. The morning sun caught her face, and Nathan saw something there he hadn't seen in ages. Peace. She wasn't the same girl who used to knock on his wall at 6:45 a.m. She was stronger now, tempered by truth and survival. "Some mornings," she said softly, "I wake up and forget which life is real. But then I hear Mom singing off-key, or Dad burning toast, and I remember, this is real. This is what we fought for." As they walked inside together, Nathan thought about all they'd lost and found. Their old life had been built on lies told with love, while their new one was built on truths, won through pain. But watching Olivia smile as she helped their father rescue his mangled pancake, Nathan knew which life he preferred. Later that night, as they watched Olivia's old journal burn in the backyard fire pit, she turned to him with tears gleaming in her eyes. But they weren't tears of pain or fear. They were tears of release. "You didn't just save me, Nathan," she whispered, watching the pages curl and blacken in the flames. "You showed me it was okay to save myself." The sparks rose into the dark winter sky like tiny stars finding their way home. Nathan wrapped an arm around his sister's shoulders, feeling the steady rhythm of her breathing, no longer shallow, with anxiety, but deep and sure. Through the kitchen window, he could see their parents washing dishes together, their father flicking soap bubbles at their mother, her laughter visible even if he couldn't hear it. Some wounds would take longer to heal. Some trusts would need to be rebuilt. Some mornings they'd still wake up reaching for the safety of their old routines. But they were together now, their real family, stronger for having been broken and remade. As the last pages of the journal turned to ash, Olivia spoke again, her voice quiet but unwavering. "You know what's funny? All this time, I thought I was keeping secrets to protect our family. But in the end, the truth didn't destroy us.